If you still have any holdouts, people who don't believe you when you tell them the corporate press is lying to them, I ask that you only share this video with them. And if you are the friend or family member of someone who has been trying to tell you the corporate press is lying to you, I pray that you simply read this headline. USA Today writes, Marsha Blackburn asked Ketanji Brown Jackson to define woman. Science says there's no simple answer. Do you believe that? Do you believe there is no simple way to define what a woman is? There actually is a very simple way to define it. The way all of humanity around the world defines it, save small ideological pockets, mainly in the US and a bit in Europe. Woman is very easily defined as adult human female. We need not have the debate. It is not my opinion. You can have a different view of what the word means based on how you use it or interpret it, and that's fine. I am telling you that even Merriam-Webster, who has been accused of being woke and changing definitions in the past, says a woman is an adult female person. They also go on to say there's other definitions, like a woman belonging to a certain category, like a councilwoman, a distinctively feminine nature, a woman who is a servant or personal attendant. And that was referred to saying like I don't think they use it anymore, to be completely honest, but Merriam-Webster wants to include it. They can say dialectical wife, mistress, or girlfriend if you were to say like my woman. A woman who's extremely fond or devoted, like a chocolate woman, someone who loves chocolate. Okay, I'm not familiar with that, but ultimately the use of the word woman is to define an adult female person. Right now, Ketanji Brown Jackson is going through Senate confirmation hearings. The big news is that Mitch McConnell has said he is not going to approve Ketanji Brown Jackson. And I'll just show you the story. Mitch McConnell confirms he will not back Ketanji Brown Jackson's nomination to the Supreme Court because she is the court packer's pick and she testified like it. I don't like Mitch McConnell. I don't like the Republican Party. I think they're all trash. I think that we have a real question about competency. But other than that, the complaints about her and her view on leniency and other issues pertaining to, people who've abused children, I think a discussion is warranted. But there is still a challenge of this is what people voted for, and they should be looking towards issues of competency, not judicial opinion. And therein lies the big, well, maybe not necessarily, but here's what I'm trying to say. There are a lot of reasons why I think Ketanji Brown Jackson probably should not be confirmed. And that's just reality. Namely is that she could not define the word woman. I know there is an argument that you don't want judges issuing definitions, that they should be looking to the legislature as to what is the definition, but I actually don't agree with that. Judges are supposed to interpret the law. That's what judges do. That means a judge can actually say, this says X, Y, and Z. I interpret it as such. This is why we have judges. Sometimes laws say things that aren't so clear. We go to a judge and say, interpret this. If the judge doesn't agree with the interpretation of the lower judge, or if the judge agrees with one party, it could go to an appellate court judge. It could go all the way up to the Supreme Court. Who knows? And they try to say, here's what we think it means. That means we want to confirm judges who know what the word woman means. Well, I want to make sure I drive this point home. If you are a holdout, if you still believe the corporate press, the mainstream media is telling you the truth, please look at this and tell me with absolute sincerity, you agree you can't define what a woman is. And if that is the case, then so be it. You and I will never agree. And our worldviews have been bifurcated. I want to read for you this story. It's rather sad, to put it mildly. Before I do, however, head over to ground.news/Tim Pool and download the ground.news app or subscribe to their service. Why? Ground News is fantastic, my friends. When you go to Ground News, what they do for you is they show you the bias breakdown of all of these articles. The link will be in the description below. This is a sponsored spot, by the way, so shout out to Ground News for sponsoring this segment. But take a look at this. We have this story. Let's scroll down. EU signs U.S. gas deal to curb reliance on Russia. And you can see that you've got namely centrist sources, moderate sources, and the left and the right covering it. But let's go to this story from USA Today, because you can see at the top of the article is the Ground News browser extension that I use. You'll see it often in the video segments I produce. Why? I'm trying to provide for you the best context possible. Now, when I tell you that this shows the corporate press is not being honest, one thing you should consider is that USA Today's bias, according to Ground News, leans left. Well, that should be apparent in their inability to define the word woman. You can then see their bias is split across 3 sources. Ground News has tracked 3 different outlets that have commented on this. 2 of them are right-leaning. This means that for people who are conservative, they're more likely to know this story. For people who are liberal, they are less likely to know this story. This is why I recommend ground.news. Go to ground.news/Tim Pool. Again, shout out. Because you can see actually the blind spots you might have. If you go to Ground News, you might find a story where, like this one right here, New York City mayor partially lifts vaccine mandates for professional athletes. It's being reported 46% of the sources are left-leaning. Conservatives may not be seeing this. Or U.S. pipeline agency pulls back plan to assess climate impacts, 45% center coverage, 18 sources with a large left-leaning. Republicans and people on the right probably don't see it. Another example, Biden has sharp response to reporter, "You're playing a game with me," and the left may not have seen that. If you go here and you want to make sure you're not being trapped in an echo chamber, if you want to make sure you're not trapped in an echo chamber, it's great to use their browser extension. Then you know if you're only consuming right-wing media or only left-wing media, and you can see it outright on their front page. So again, shout out, a little bit longer than normal, but I think it matters as to the context of this segment. USA Today's, in my opinion, absolutely absurd article saying there's no simple answer to what a woman is. They write, in the 13th hour of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's confirmation hearing Thursday, Senator Marsha Blackburn asked the Supreme Court nominee, "Can you provide a definition for the word woman?" Jackson appeared confused, responding, "I'm not a biologist." No. She said, I can't. I'm not a biologist. You don't need to be a biologist. This has triggered a major meme that is spreading around where any kind of circumstance where you'd be asked a question, you can defer by saying you're not a academic. There's one where it's a cop saying, "Do you know how fast you were going?" And the driver says, "I don't know. I'm not a physicist." Blackburn chided Jackson, claiming, "The fact that you can't give me a straight answer about something as fundamental as what a woman is underscores the dangers of the kind of progressive education that we are hearing about." Senators on both sides of the aisle have used Jackson's confirmation hearing to air issues that have less to do with Jackson's qualifications and more to do with their respective parties. The exchange reflects the current state of gender politics in the U.S., and they go on to reference the NCAA. And I agree with that. The issue this is coming up specifically is because in the news right now is issues of gender ideology. If Jackson is confirmed, it is inevitable she will preside over cases involving trans rights. Scientists, gender law scholars, and philosophers of biology, I'm sorry, a what? Philosophers of biology? Said Jackson's response was commendable, though perhaps misleading. It's useful, they say, that Jackson suggested science could help answer Blackburn's question, but they note that a competent biologist would not be able to offer a definitive answer either. Scientists agree there is no sufficient way to clearly define what makes someone a woman. And with billions of women on the planet, there is much variation. That's a lie. It's just fundamentally not true. They're outright making that up. Please share this video with every single suburban mother you know, every single one of them who are adamant about supporting these politicians. Tell them, ask them, seriously ask any holdout you know who still believes the media or believes the insane lies they're espousing here. Ask them, can you define woman? And if they align with this article, if you agree with their science, I ask you this: are you a woman? And if you are and think you are, why do you think so? Answer that question. Why do you think you are a woman? Now, let me go through this one more time. Philosophers of biology and gender law scholars? Okay. Now, truth be told, gender law scholar maybe actually have an interesting argument about how society deals with what a man or woman is. That I can understand. But to say that scientists don't. In fact, Dr. Deborah So is a scientist. And she clearly has a definition, a very, very specific one, talking about gametes. I'm not the scientist, but I can clearly tell you that there is a simple layman definition: adult human female. What is female? Female is the sex of an organism that produces non-mobile ova. I just read the encyclopedia. That's what it said. That's what scientists say. Yeah, they say scientists agree there's no sufficient way to clearly define. That's just not true. Scientists overwhelmingly agree. And this is why on Wikipedia, they can't change the definition of female or woman. Activists have certainly tried to change the definition of woman or female in these dictionaries and on Wikipedia. Wikipedia, anyone can go in and edit it. The problem is there's no literature saying anything else. It all says a woman is an adult human female. A female is the sex of an organism that produces the non-mobile or mobile ova. So, whereas the male produces sperm, or whatever the word is. I'm not a scientist. Quote, I don't want to see this question punted to biology as if science can offer a simple definitive answer, said Rebecca Jordan Young, a scientist and gender studies scholar at Barnard College, whose work explores the relationship between science and the social hierarchies of gender and sexuality. The rest of her answer was more interesting and important. She said, as a judge, what I do is I address disputes. If there's a dispute about a definition, people make arguments, and I look at the law and I decide. In other words, said context matters, which is true in both biology and society. I think it's a pretty good answer for a judge. I don't. I think a good answer would be, I'll give you my answer. If you're asking me colloquially what I would mean by the word woman, I would typically be referring to adult human female. Now, in a legal context, definitions do sometimes mean different things, such as the word malice. Actual malice in the context of defamation law does not refer to malintent or ill intent towards a person or to cause harm towards a person. It's a reference to whether someone knew or didn't know something was true. So for a legal definition, that's going to come from court cases. That's going to come from arguments pertaining to court precedent. What I can say is, colloquially, as most people would understand it in day-to-day language, woman refers to adult human female. But you also need to understand there are some contextual issues around trans people which do come up, which means there will be profound legal questions as to what this word means as a matter of law. Was that so hard? Was that so difficult? Ketanji Brown saying, I can't define the word woman. The reality is, in my opinion, I should say this. I think she can define the word woman. I think she very well could have said everything I said. But what I said is considered offensive, because you shouldn't say that, right? They go on to say, there isn't one single biological answer to the definition of a woman. Blackburn tweeted after the exchange that this is a simple question and called Jackson's response a major red flag. But Jordan Young said she sees Jackson's answer, particularly the second half, reflecting the necessity of nuance. While traditional notions of sex and gender suggest a simple binary, if you are born with, let's just say male junk, you are male and identify as a man. And if you were born with lady junk, you are female and identify as a woman. The reality, gender experts say, is more complex. No, they don't. Some do, some don't. When they say, gender experts say it's true, you're talking about a large field of science in which there are many people who disagree. And there is, truth be told, there's a left perspective, a right perspective. But ultimately, when it comes down to actual science, they're not disputing this. Look at this. There isn't one single biological answer to the definition of woman. There's not even a singular biological answer to the question of what is female. This is insane. You know what? If you want to live in that world, I don't care. I really, really don't. If you want to believe that female has no definition, I don't care. You do you. I'll do me. I'll go over here with my friends and we'll play, Monopoly, and you can go over there and play Chutes and Ladders or whatever game you want to play. We'll play our own games. I'll mind my own business. You go mind your own business. But this, I don't think you can function if you don't understand what female means. Females have 2 X chromosomes. Females produce eggs. Females have wider hips, less bone density, less skin collagen. They give birth. Now, you need to understand that when we talk about things in generalities, we're not talking about absolutes. There are certainly individuals who are born intersex. That's a fact. But when we're referring to male and female as specific categories, someone who is intersex may not fall within either because of certain, issues pertaining. Well, that's what we mean by intersex, a mixture of both. However, that does not suggest there is no binary. Male and female are binary. you produce one or produce the other, and there are it's not absolute in the sense that there are some deviations and things can happen, but it is overwhelmingly, I believe it's like 99.8% of human beings fall into one or the other. Now, when it comes to secondary sexual characteristics, there's great variance. When it comes to characteristics associated with masculinity or femininity, then it is absolutely bimodal. So if you want to talk about gender as a social construct, I can have a conversation all around that, no problem. There may be a man who is effeminate with a squeaky voice, low testosterone, who is 5'3". Many of these men exist. They're still men. They're still male. There are women who are 6'5" and super ripped with high testosterone. They exist, but these are on the highest end and the lowest ends of the bell curve in terms of their height, their weight, etc. So looking at the NCAA, for instance, the reason why there are issues around why people take issue with Leah Thomas competing is that in the male bell curve for height, 6'1" is at the high end, but not the highest. Around 14% of the United States males will be 6'1" or taller. 14%. That is what are we looking at? Like 1 in 6 or so men that are going to be around that height, a little bit, around there. You get the point. So that's a lot. It's a lot of dudes who are 6'1" or taller. Among women, the highest end of the bell curve, which drops down to like 1 in 1,000, is 5'10". No joke. The highest end of the bell curve, it's probably 5'11", to be honest. But most women, I think the average height is 5'4" for females in the United States. And women who are 5'10" or 5'11" are considered the highest end of the bell curve. Now, of course, there are women who are 6'5". There are women who are 7 feet. Absolutely. The WNBA has many very tall women. But that it is much, much more rare for a woman to be over 6 feet than it is for a man to be over 6 feet, which means you will have 14% of men who are able to compete at a higher level than biological females on average. Now, there's perhaps a solution. Perhaps we should have weight and height classes to swimming as opposed to gender classes, right? In MMA, they do weight classes, right? I think they still do men and women's, but sure. Anybody who weighs a certain amount who wants to fight, I mean, you can choose to do it as far as I'm concerned. Maybe that's an answer. Then you'd only have 6'1" women competing with other 6'1" women or trans women or otherwise. Maybe then these, women who are 5'4", whatever, would all be competing against each other. They go on to say, Sarah Richardson, a Harvard scholar, historian, and philosopher of biology who focuses on science of sex and gender and policy, said Jackson's answer accurately reflects legal practice. While U.S. law remains an unsettled arena for conceptualization and definition of sex, it is frequently grounds for sex categorization in biological evidence and reasoning. But like Jordan Young, Richardson emphasized that biology does not offer a simple, singular answer to the question of what defines a woman. It literally does. A fierce debate, blah, blah, blah. I honestly think this is, it's absurd. It is. If you want to talk about trans women in sports, we absolutely can. But there's a reason why there's a word, trans woman. There's a reason why it's used across the board. There's a reason why even they, at USA Today, bring up trans women in sports. If it were as simple to say that a trans woman was a woman, and in some context, that is true. In some context. But in the colloquial definition of the word woman, it becomes confusing. If it was as simple to say a trans woman is a woman, then you wouldn't need the phrase trans woman. The reason why I say in some contexts it's true is I'm sort of playing off of what Ben Shapiro had said in the past, that maybe true isn't the right way to phrase it, but the idea was Ben Shapiro was saying that if he were to be introducing his friends to Blair White, for instance, he would say, if he was speaking to her in public or something like that, she, her, because it's too difficult to explain to someone how this outwardly presenting individual who looks overtly female is actually biologically male. And for the sake of simplicity and being on public, you'd be like, over there with her. Otherwise, people would be confused and it'd be a lot harder. That's basically what I mean when I say, in a social context, there's an understanding of why you would say a trans woman is a woman. But when we're talking about a legal context, there needs to be a distinction. There's difficulties, real difficulties in this entire debate. Truth be told, Trans women do experience discrimination, and I think it's unfortunate. Depends on the discrimination, however. If you're saying that a biological male has to use a biologically male, restroom and females for female restrooms, well, that's discrimination. Is it good, though? I think that the fact remains there's a reason why we separate bathrooms based on biological sex. Different equipment. It's that simple. Women's bathrooms, female bathrooms, have more stalls and, in fact, no urinals. Men's rooms, often, some of them have a trough or whatever you'd call it. You go to some sports bars and they have a big tin bin and all the guys just stand around it pissing into it. Well, because of the equipment difference, there's different facilities. And then you also have the issue that biological females, many often don't feel safe around large men, especially when they're dealing with private matters, or they just want to be in private with other women. There you go. The issue arises then on who has a right to a space and why. Truth be told, I have no problem saying this too. The people who when you're looking at gender segregation in sports and bathrooms, you've got to contend with the 1964 Civil Rights Act, because separate but equal, I don't think will play up, especially as we move forward. And so there's going to be real questions about this in legal precedent, probably with someone like Ketanji Brown Jackson on the Supreme Court. That is to say, why would we tell a biological female she can't legally use a men's room, or a biological male he can't legally use the women's restroom? You can't restrict facilities to an individual based on gender. This is in law already. Now, I understand why people do, like I already explained, but that's going to be a real legal question. And what's the answer? In some instances, separate but equal works. I had a good conversation with an individual on IRL who was saying that around the world, when it comes to race, the reason why we don't tolerate racial segregation and racism is because you've got people of all different backgrounds, different skin colors who have been called similar or different things because it's not as easy to define. For instance, you have someone from Somalia will be called black. Someone from Haiti will also be called black. But the height difference on average between these two countries is substantial. In Somalia, they're much shorter. They actually have a lighter skin tone or things like that. And then someone would just say black. And it's like, well, these are two completely different people. Very, very different in every way. If you're trying to make some kind of distinction about physicality based on skin color, when skin color doesn't actually represent someone's average height or anything like that, well, then that makes no sense. However, what they said to me was, around the world, male and female, men and women have been defined by every single culture with very obvious, distinct physical differences between the two among their own countries, among their own people. So if you were to say in Somalia, you have a male and a female, they're going to be distinct, very easily distinct. If you take a Haitian female and a Somali female, there may be height differences or things like that, but they're going to have 99.8% of the time breasts and ovaries and, the same junk, and will likely require and will require basically the same facilities for, to the near in a generality, right? So some people may have injuries or things like that, whatever. The point is, a woman from Somalia and a woman from Haiti both will not require a urinal. And that was the point they were making. So look, there are some really deep philosophical questions around how we handle the issue of rights. I think there's a really simple solution to a lot of this, like when it comes to the bathroom stuff. Stop making multi-use bathrooms. Just make single-room bathrooms. Instead of doing 2 big rooms, one for men and one for women, do 4 single rooms. And then you've got a private room. I mean, people prefer those anyway. You go and you close and lock the door behind you and you have the whole room to yourself. Then you don't got to worry about any of this. It doesn't become an issue and no one has to debate each other. You ain't seeing any conservatives going in and being like, how come there's 4 single stall rooms that you can go in and lock the door? They just use the bathroom. They don't care. The issue is when you're putting biological males and females in the same space. Then people are saying, the issue here is, do people have a right to privacy? Should women and girls, females, be protected or have the right to a space? Conservatives tend to think so. Liberals tend not. Liberals apparently can't define the word as it is. Anyway, whatever, man. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.